Hey everybody, I'm nutritionist Dr. Mike Russell, and welcome to this episode of the Dr. Mike Show. Today we're going to be talking about some new dietary supplement legislation in Rhode Island and some other laws and regulations about supplements so you can be a more informed consumer. All right, so today we're going to talk about dietary supplements and some of the regulations around dietary supplements. One of the things that you'll oftentimes hear about supplements is that they're unregulated, right? That it's totally the Wild West. And I would say that is not entirely accurate. It's not that dietary supplements aren't regulated, but it's just their regulation is different than things, say, like prescription medications. So I think the best way to explain it is that if a drug is going to be released, right, a prescription medication, it requires this FDA approval, kind of a pre-market approval process. Whereas dietary supplements, it's a little more, you don't have to ask for permission, you more just have to ask for forgiveness if you do something wrong. And that shows that it's not that they're unregulated, but that the regulation is different. And as you can imagine, there are so many dietary supplements and so many ingredients and so many companies selling them. Like the barrier of entry to the dietary supplement industry now is so small that they're popping up all over the place, so that it's really hard to regulate all of those things. So can a company selling a product that maybe doesn't contain what it says and making false claims about their product, could they sell and could they make all kinds of money? Totally, right? Before they get caught. I mean, I've unfortunately been in the room and met a handful of individuals who this was literally their playbook for dietary supplements, is that they would create a product, right, irrespective of whether it worked or not, build a call center, sell that product very aggressively online, on TV, via direct mail, make insane claims about what it would do, make as much money as possible, and then they would basically wait until they got shut down by the government. And then when they got shut down, they would pay a fine. But let's say they pay a $2 million fine, but they made $40 million in 2 years. They would shut down the shop, wait a couple years, and go do it again. So there are all kinds of super shady ways to get around this idea of asking forgiveness instead of permission from the FDA. But that doesn't mean that dietary supplements as a whole are bad. And it also means, though, that there are a lot of good companies. One of the things that I've worked to do through the formulation of Nutein in that company, and then Neuro Coffee, which has now become Substance Nutrition with our new product Synthesis. One of the things that I've worked to do, and there are a lot of companies out there working to do, is show their legitimacy, to understand that it's something that can be trusted by customers. Because I think even though a company might have the best interests of their consumer at hand, maybe the manufacturer doesn't. There are all kinds of stories of athletes who have tested positive for drug tests from using products that they thought were totally fine, that they weren't actually trying to, but these things have popped up because companies will put in ingredients that shouldn't be there in order to get an effect. And this is done illegally, right? You can just Google it and you'll find a handful of Olympic athletes who have tested positive and blamed it on other things that they didn't know. And I know from knowing trainers and people that have worked with some of these individuals that it's happened to, that this is genuine. It is truly, these accidents do happen and they're terrible. But then there's also, people out there, if you think back, if you're old enough to remember the whole Mark McGuire, Barry Bonds pro-hormone thing, when, they would say that, it wasn't steroids, it was ZMA and it was this androdiastine or whatever the pro-hormone was, right? When the people have used dietary supplements as a scapegoat. All this really does is just make it very, very confusing for the consumer who's saying, well, I just want to use some products so I can be the healthiest I want to be, so I can be the best that I can be, so I can perform the best that I want to be. That's what I want. And how can I do that? Who can I trust? What can I do? And so in this episode, I want to walk you through some of those things that you can do in order to put yourself in a situation to succeed in making that happen. So what would bring us to that is one of the things, kind of what got me thinking along this process, is there was some new legislation in Rhode Island about dietary supplements that was causing stink. Like, I'm in a lot of newsletters and listservs from the supplement industry, and there's a lot in there about regulations and different things that have been happening. You may have heard that N-acetylcysteine is something that was it was being pulled from the market. It was actually entirely removed from Amazon for a little bit, and that it was not going to be able to be produced. And part of the reason behind that was that the FDA was saying that N-acetylcysteine was actually a compound that was used in a drug, I think it was like way back in the 40s, and thus it was not a dietary supplement and could not be used. So, which is really too bad, because N-acetylcysteine is a really good supplement. So it's a precursor and mimics glutathione in the body. So it's actually used sometimes in medicine for people who have alcohol poisoning. When your body processes and uses alcohol, it uses up glutathione in the liver, and so N-acetylcysteine can be used to replenish that. So I always think it's great to take after maybe you had one too many drinks one night, wake up in the morning, take 600, 1200 milligrams of N-acetylcysteine. It's a good way to kind of start to get your liver back on track. It's also, there's some evidence to suggest that it might help prevent or lessen upper respiratory infections. So with clients that I've had, especially business and professional athlete clients who do a lot of airline travel, and especially when they're tired, stressed, and kind of their immune system is worn down, using N-acetylcysteine as a proactive way to help support immune function in those situations is another great use for it. I mean, it's got a long history of use, very safe, but because of this kind of nuance, the fact that it was previously used as a drug, it was getting pulled from the market. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case, fortunately, so it's back in action. So you don't have to hoard N-acetylcysteine. I might have bought, 10 or 15 bottles when I thought the FDA was going to be taking it off the market, but that doesn't seem like that needs to be the case. But there's a lot of this back and forth in the media now and in the news of what's been going on with dietary supplements as it becomes more popular, and there is going to be definitely some regulatory scrutiny. Like we want to talk about, it's called the Dietary Supplement Listing Act of 2022 is also something that's being discussed in the legislature. But let's talk about this Rhode Island Supplement Act, because I actually think this is a good thing. Everybody, kind of wholesale regulatory on dietary supplements is bad. I think it's actually good. So let me read just a little blurb of this and what was passed. So the legislation states, dietary supplements set forth in Section A of this section, or dietary supplements for weight loss. So first off, we're not even talking all dietary supplements. We're talking weight loss supplements, which categorically don't work, right? Weight loss may be purchased upon request made by the customer to the seller. The seller shall request valid identification from any individual who attempts to purchase a dietary supplement set forth in this section, if the individual reasonably appears to the seller to be under the age of 18. Subsection A refers to dietary supplements containing ephedrine group alkaloids or a dietary supplement containing a variety of prohormones. So basically what we're saying here is that weight loss supplements and prohormone supplements are going to have to be behind the counter, that they're not going to be out on the shelves, and that you're going to have to say, I'd like to purchase that. So it's kind of this additional barrier to purchase. And if you don't look, and you have to be 18. Now, you don't have to be ID'd, but you do if you don't look like you're 18. And all this is doing is creating a little bit of additional barrier for these supplements that basically don't work anyway, right? Preventing younger people from doing it. Now, I would say, let me pull back my screen here. I would have loved it if this would have been around when I was a kid, because I can remember as a kid walking around a supplement store and I had so many dollars in my hand. I thought dietary supplements were the coolest thing ever, right? And because I was going to get bigger, stronger, leaner, faster, like all of that stuff. And it wasn't even what's going to help me, but it's, like any 17-year-old kid, it's like, how much can I buy for what I have? And so I wasn't even a discriminating consumer. It was just like, what could I purchase with the money that I had? And so whatever cost $35 or less, that's what I was going to buy, irrespective of if it worked, if it was what I needed or anything like that. So taking these extra steps to protect young consumers from products that generally don't work, right? And in the form of, like, say, weight loss supplements, those are generally going to be stimulant based. And, it's easy to overabuse stimulants, especially as a kid. So I think that this is a move in the right direction. And it just shows that regulation around dietary supplements as a whole, I don't think is necessarily bad. But so um, getting to now the idea of the FDA's regulation of supplements and how do we understand this whole process. This concept of forgiveness, not asking for permission. So the FDA does regulate manufacturing of supplements. The labeling of supplements have to be labeled in a certain way. They have to disclose certain things. The marketing, along with the FTC, the marketing of supplements. But again, you have to ask. You don't have to ask for permission to do all these things. So you can create a product. You make sure you check all those boxes, and then you just wait. And if someone comes along from a regulatory standpoint and says, well, hey, your label isn't like it needs to be, or you're making claims like you don't need to, like you're not allowed to, you have to make these changes, right? If this company is purely selling online, which a lot of companies, are nowadays, I mean, the repercussion isn't much in that they just have to stop selling and change the label or change their marketing. It's a bigger push if you're in retail and then you need to pull all that product back, right? So larger companies have a larger vested interest in staying compliant. But the point here is that it opens the door for unscrupulous individuals to sell products, trying to make a quick buck, not worrying about the longevity of their business or that trust in the customer. So when in doubt, be skeptical and know that you need to be the one who has to be kind of that regulator, since dietary supplements aren't being regulated up front. It's only on the back end when they're getting checked. So you need to be the one on the upfront, asking the questions, asking about the formulas, asking about the dosages, wondering about the manufacturing capabilities, right? Was this made in somebody's garage or in somebody's bathtub, or was this made at a FDA inspected facility using, GMP practices? So those are really the important things to ask yourself. The other thing is there's so many more third-party verification processes that companies can engage in that make it a lot easier for the consumer to say, okay, well, I trust what's in this ingredient. So I can tell you, like when we did Synthesis here, the newest substance nutrition product, it's a whey protein isolate, micellular casein protein blend. When we did this, we did heavy metal testing. We did, we did bacterial testing. We're doing third party. So we did a variety of testing that was in the lab itself, in the manufacturing facility, making sure that what was in the product and what was on the label were in line with each other. So we did that in-house, but then we also took it to a third party and shipped it off, paid additional lab fees to get the lot tested, to make sure that it was free of banned substances. So we have multiple checks here that products, raw ingredients are getting tested on their way into the facility. They're getting tested again after in the final product. Then we're shipping it off to a third party lab and business, and then that's certifying that it was then free of banned substances. So that we want to give the consumers, we want to give people like you that level of trust to say, like, not only are these ingredients quality, not only is it dosed in a way that makes sense from a scientific perspective, so it's going to help my body, but that it's also been tested and tested and tested, so I know it's safe and good for me, right? The amount of testing and oversight that has gone into this, far exceeds many of the food products that people consume on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, I'm not sure the regulatory and testing processes with ketchup, but I'm sure that Synthesis has gone through much more testing than the bottle of ketchup that's in your refrigerator, right? So that's really what you want to look for. And these are things like NSF certified for sport, Informed Sport, which is the one that we're doing with Substance Nutrition. There's also Informed Choice, which is a little similar to Informed Sport, but the testing frequency is a little bit different. Companies can publish their lab results. I know a lot of those companies do that online. That's one of the next steps we're doing with Substance Nutrition, that you'll be able to scan and look and say, well, here, I'm lot number 536, and then you can see the heavy metal testing results. So in light of this pre-market authorization that the FDA does not do with dietary supplements, it's important to look to companies to give you that information so that you know, because otherwise, how do you know? And we know that there is a dark underside of the industry, and so you want to be in a place where you feel good about it. And I think that companies that are invested in their customers and invested in people reaching whatever goals they're trying to support with their supplements, it's not that expensive to do all the testing. And it should be something that we do for customers. So that's what you really want to look out for yourself instead of trusting. Because if the game is ask for forgiveness, not permission from a regulatory perspective, you shouldn't have to just put your blind trust in a company that you don't necessarily know. So that's kind of where I fall on dietary supplement regulatory settings, what's important, those rules, and what we as customers and consumers would do. Like, I'm just as much of a consumer of dietary supplements as you are. And when we were going through and putting together, when I was putting together the process for synthesis, I thought, well, what would I want to do? I want the same thing that you want. And I also made it in line a lot for the people in my family, my kids who are going to use this. And we get questions already like, is this something that children can use? And we've tried to make it, we've literally gone to what would the best in the industry do from safety, regulation, purity, ingredient standpoint. Let's do that so everybody feels good about taking it. So I wanted to talk about one more thing. There is this Dietary Supplement Listing Act of 2022. And this is some potential legislation that's out there. And what this would do, it would require, it would kind of take dietary supplements one step forward towards being more like regulated like a drug, because, it would have this pre-market approval. So it would require submitting name, ingredient list, label, allergen statement, health and structure and function claims. So, what are the claims about the product that you're making? Submitting all those and more to the FDA ahead of time. And I'm sure that this is like really something that the supplement industry is going to fight tooth and nail, because it just slows the ability to put out and produce products. But it would also, I think, greatly strengthen the integrity of the industry. Because if you've watched any of the What Does Dr. Mike Think About videos, and I'm working to make some more of those, the questions that I'm asking about products or supplements or nutritional practices are basic ones that we should be asking. Like, what does the science say about this? Like, are we doing it in an amount that makes sense? Like, if your protein powder has 10 grams of protein, is that really helping you at all? Or does it need to be 30, right? It really needs to be 30. 10's probably not doing, it doesn't contain the amino acids needed to support optimal muscle growth and repair, to support protein needs. So is the dose even doing what we hope? Like, could it possibly do what it hope? Does it work in people like you? Right? Are the products that you're taking, are they tested to work and show benefit in healthy individuals? Or if you have diabetes, people with diabetes? Or is this purely concepts, nutritional theories based on animal and cellular research? Right? These are important questions that you should be asking yourself. I think one of the other supplements, BetaAlanine, I think is just like an amazing product of marketing. And I wrote with Dr. John Berardi years ago, probably almost 15 years ago, one of the first research papers on beta-alanine as a review paper. It was beta-alanine first came out, I think it was actually around 2006. And the idea about beta-alanine is the concept behind it, and it was first used originally actually in racehorses to improve sprint speed in racehorses. That supplementing with beta-alanine would actually then help the body buffer pH in the muscles, and then allow muscles to continue to contract and function. So if you were a sprinter, you could sprint a little further, you could sprint faster, longer, after your muscles were loaded, after taking like a loading dose of beta-alanine. And it went through in the industry a couple versions of it. So at first there was time release beta-alanine, because when you take a lot of beta-alanine, it gives you like the tingles. So from a supplement perspective, a lot of companies like beta-alanine because you took it, and then as a user, you like felt it. Like, I can remember the first time I ever took beta-alanine, like my whole body was tingling. Actually, I thought something was wrong, right? But that was something that people like to feel, because you feel it working. It's why caffeine is used in pretty much every pre-workout supplement, so that when you take it, you're like, oh, this is working. The fact that caffeine has never really been shown to consistently improve lifts and strength in the gym is like a total non-factor in the pre-workout world, right? But anyway, with beta-alanine, so there was a lot of hype around the product, this idea about buffering pH, fighting lactic acid, quenching hydrogen ions. Like it's the stuff that like Muscle Magazine advertisements were built for. So it had a really good story. But 6 grams is a lot for people to take, especially then you start spreading it out. Well, I'll take it 3 times a day. And it's hard enough for someone to take something once a day than it is to take it 3 times a day every day. So then products just slowly started putting in half or a third of the dose. So 2 grams of beta-alanine in a pre-workout supplement. And then you would be responsible for taking the 4 grams at other times. Well, if 6 grams was marginal, right? Like 2 grams is literally doing nothing. You still would get that tingle, so you would still feel like it's working. But then over the years, as the research in humans, like human clinical research, started to come out and really show, now it was just a couple months ago, there was one if not 2 review papers showing that beta-alanine really doesn't enhance athletic or physical performance via any meaningful measure. But at this point, like the cat's out of the bag, like whatever the horse has left the starting gate, like pick the metaphor or the saying that you want. It's in so many products. So many people believe that it works. The fact that the science says this actually really doesn't work, it's not giving you the effect that you want, is something that's lost. It's definitely lost in the noise of the marketing. And so as a consumer, I think it's important to try to stay plugged in, to find reputable sources. I try to be that reputable source for you to be able to say, hey, you know what? I wrote the paper in 2006 about this, and I thought this was going to be a really new, exciting, and useful supplement for people. But science evolves and we learn stuff, and it's not, like paying for beta-alanine is pretty much a waste of money for you. So it's important to understand that the industry evolves, and being able to listen to and hear people who are open to what the science is going to say. I read a great article this morning about fish oil and fish oil supplementation and the kind of ups and downs of fish oil and heart health. And, omega-3 fatty acids is one of the reasons I got into nutritional science. Like, I was so enamored by the molecular story. But as the science has unfolded, it's not as spectacular as we once thought. Like, are omega-3 fatty acids still very important? Definitely. Should you be eating fatty fish? Yes. If you don't, should you take a supplement? I really think so. But do you need 5 grams a day? And is it right for everybody? Probably not, right? We need to temper our zeal for things as more science comes out showing this is how it works, or this is how it doesn't work. And that's just kind of like the down and dirty of science. But we really need to be open for that. And unfortunately, in the supplement industry, most companies and product developers aren't open for that. They're open for, here's one thing that shows that it's good, let's ignore everything else and really push this forward. So we'll see what's going to happen with the Dietary Supplement Listing Act of 2022. I think it'll be a big push to add that level of regulation to such a big industry. If you hear anything about this new Rhode Island Supplement Act that was passed by the Rhode Island legislature, know that I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. Like, we need to protect young people who don't necessarily know what's good or what's not good for them from this perspective, because these things, just like anything else, tobacco, alcohol, this other stuff, like, it is regulated and shielded from people at young ages. And I think that with this class of supplements, weight loss and pro hormones, that's a smart thing to do. So that's kind of going to wrap it up with our discussion about dietary supplements, regulation, how the industry works, and what are the things that you need to look out for. If you have any questions, you can reply. If you get the Dr. Mike emails, reply to the email, shoot me a question, post comments if you're watching this on the blog. And if you get this from iTunes or Stitcher or someplace like that, give us a review and leave some comments. Always looking to hear from you guys, always looking to hear your questions so we can find better ways to answer your questions and help you reach your goals, because I know it's hard to actively want to pursue your fitness and health goals in the light of all the roadblocks there are in the world today for people who try to live that strong, fit, and healthy life. So I want to be here to be that strength for you to answer those questions. And thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.